As we study the life of Jesus, we're taking some time today to learn about his earthly family. So Mother's Day is a good day to be able to do that. And as we talk about the family members, we're going to read a passage from the book of Mark in just a little bit that addresses the situation that happened with his family. But we're going to back up a little bit and kind of take a little look at Mary and Joseph and his siblings as well, what we do know about them. So we're going to begin with Mary, of course, since it's Mother's Day. As we know, she was a young woman who was living in Nazareth. She was engaged to be married to Joseph. She was not a sinless person, but she is what God calls a humble servant. And she was willing to take on the task that God gave her to be able to let the embryo of what would become the Son of God live inside of her, and to be able to give birth to him and be his earthly mother for the days of his life. Now, during Jesus' adult life, we don't find Mary and Jesus together very often, but we did see them together at a wedding in Cana, where we looked at a few weeks ago, where Jesus did his first big miracle, turning water into wine. It was the request of his mom. His mom says, "Hey, we're having trouble here." And maybe his mom was part of one of the hostesses there. It was probably a relative. Maybe she was helping with things, and they were running out of the drink and said, "Hey, Jesus, do something about it. Show us what you can do." And Jesus did that. She's going to show up in today's text, we'll get to in a minute. But we also see her at the very end of Jesus' life. When he is dying there on that cross, his mother is there. Obviously, she accompanied Jesus and his disciples to Jerusalem for the Passover during that time. It's very possible, we know that there were a lot of women that traveled along with them. It wasn't just Jesus and the 12 men, but there was women that went along as well. And they learned from Jesus. They were not official disciples because that was something that the boys did. But there were some women that traveled along that probably, remember, these disciples were probably teenagers, okay? They were probably teenage boys according to the cultural norms at the time. And so there were some probably moms around kind of making sure they were fed and taken care of and behaving themselves. So Mary could have been one of these women that traveled around with them sometimes. There were other children at home, as we're going to see here today. But it's very possible then that Mary and these women were there even at the Last Supper. Maybe they were preparing the meal for the guys. I know that sounds sexist, but that's what moms do, right? They prepare the meals for their guys, and that's what they were probably doing there as well, reading between the lines. And I'm sure that the crucifixion caught Mary off guard too. I mean, she was not necessarily expecting this to happen as well. And when, except for the disciple John, all the other disciples scattered when Jesus was arrested. But John was there and Mary was there at the cross witnessing that. And any mom that sees their kid going through any sort of pain at all, even if it's a toothache or a skinned knee, it hurts just as much as it does them, right? Can you imagine seeing your son up there on the cross getting beat, that crown of thorns in his head, the nails in his hands, being taunted, being cursed at? That was probably a very painful moment for her soul. And at her pregnancy, Gabriel, the angel, had warned her and said that you're going to carry a very heavy burden. And what he goes through is going to pierce your own heart. And it obviously did at that time at the cross. We read that when the Holy Spirit came in that upper room in the book of Acts, we read that Mary was there as well. So she was there at that time, and we'll get to that in a little bit too. But one of the great things about the gospel of Jesus Christ is that the gospel elevates the role of women in cultures where women have been pushed as second-class citizens, as people that had no rights. The gospel says, hey, women are created in God's image, and women need to be honored and respected, and they have an important role in the family, in the community, in the church. And that is something that is taught throughout the New Testament. No matter what culture we're in the church culture that we are in, women are important as well. So, going on to Joseph here, we don't know too much about him. He was a descendant of David. He should have been royalty, but instead he is what they call a carpenter, but he was probably more literally a stonemason. Because there weren't that many trees around there, but they did a lot of things out of stone. He was originally from Bethlehem, being a descendant of David, but he lived up in Galilee and Nazareth, which is up in the northern part of Israel, which was a poor, unsophisticated place to live. He was a very humble man, but we know that he was a man of integrity. He was a man of courage, and he was chosen by God to be the earthly father of Jesus. And even when his wife was miraculously pregnant without his participation in the matter, he still wanted to do the right thing and to support her in this task that he had. We know that Joseph and Mary, they tried to raise Jesus and their children in the ways that God wanted to. We know that they took them, even though it took a lot of time and money and everything to make those annual trips to Jerusalem for the Passover. Not everybody could do that, but they made the sacrifices necessary to be able to see that their children, and Jesus especially, would be exposed to the religious teachings and to the holidays and the things that they remembered there. And after this took place, when Jesus is 12 years old, we never hear about Joseph again. And so we're assuming that he's passed away sometime between the time when Jesus is 12 and 30 years old. Jesus started his ministry when he was 30, and probably because he had to be the man of the house as the oldest son. At some point along the way, he had to help provide for the family and probably took over his father's business, doing the work while his younger siblings were being raised. But people remember that this was Joseph's son. And many times people say, isn't this Joseph's son? You know, when they're referring to Jesus, because they knew who he was. They knew who his father was. When it comes to his siblings, we have the names of some of them. There was a James. There was another Joseph, or sometimes called Joseph. There was a Jude, who could also be called Judas. In the languages of that time, there was Greek language and the Aramaic language and the Hebrew language. And so names kind of got all, twisted around a little bit, a letter off here or there, depending on which language you were using at the time. There was a Simon, and he had many unnamed sisters. So we don't know their names, but pretty much these Bible names repeated themselves a lot. So there were we could probably guess pretty well what the sisters' names could have been, knowing which were the popular names at the time. As Jesus began his ministry, and he's 30 years old, and he has these younger siblings. Now, they're not probably children anymore. They're probably young people themselves. But we read in Mark 3:21, it says, when his family heard what Jesus was saying, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, he's out of his mind. Okay, so Jesus' brothers and sisters, they don't like the stuff that Jesus is doing. For some reason, they did not have a good relationship with him. And they tried to stop him from going out and teaching and doing the things he was doing. They went around telling everybody, hey, he's crazy. Don't pay any attention to him. He's delusional. They're saving themselves from embarrassment. They're embarrassed by their older brother. They don't believe that he really is the Son of God who he is. And they didn't think it was appropriate that he was out doing what he was doing there. Another time in John 7, verses 3-5, the brothers and sisters are telling Jesus, just get out of here. Don't even hang around here in Galilee anymore. Go down to Judea. Just go down there. Just stay away from us. Go do all your miracles down there. They didn't like having him around. Maybe it's because he got more attention, and all of a sudden he becomes this popular guy. We don't know, but you can imagine sibling rivalry. You can imagine just what it would be like to grow up when you have a perfect older sibling. Now, some of you did grow up with perfect older siblings. No, you didn't. But some of you thought you were the oldest perfect sibling, right? Okay. Anyway, you can just imagine. I mean, this is a human family. You imagine the dynamics that are there. These younger siblings did not like Jesus very well. And so they said, go down to Judea, go down to Jerusalem, where they knew that that's where all the political leaders are, that's where all the religious leaders are, and maybe they would take care of Jesus down there. So we don't know what they were doing, but they hinted very well that they did not like Jesus. And at the passage we're going to look at today, the big passage we'll look at, we'll see that as well. The siblings were not present with their mother at the crucifixion. And so at the cross, Jesus, seeing his mother there and seeing his one disciple, John, there, he makes this statement. He says, John, this is your mother. And he says to his mother, Mary, this is your son. He saw the spiritual bond that was there, and he wanted to make sure, because he didn't know that his brothers and sisters are going to take care of mom there, but he wanted John to do that and make sure that his mom was taken care of there when he was losing his life on the cross. It showed that Jesus really had a great relationship with his mother, that he respected her, honored her, wanted to make sure she was provided for, and is a great example to all of us in reaching out and making sure that our mothers get what they deserve. But they were not there at the crucifixion. But not too much later, in that upper room, after Jesus has resurrected, he's gone into heaven, he told his disciples, gather together and wait for the Holy Spirit. When we get to Acts 1:14, we read this. It says, all the disciples with one accord were devoting themselves to prayer, together with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers and sisters. So the good news is that something great happened after the resurrection. In those 40 days that Jesus was still on the earth, that his brothers and sisters came around. Isn't that great? Can we just applaud that? I think that is awesome, you know? There is hope for people who might be antagonistic. There's hope for those that are still lost and wayward, that Jesus doesn't give up on them, and he gives them chances. So we want to know what happened that changed their mind. We don't really know, because the Bible gives us the very minimum on the details there. But Paul's writing about the resurrection of Jesus in 1 Corinthians 15. And he says Jesus was buried. He was raised on the third day according to the scriptures. He appeared to Peter and then to the 12 disciples. Then he appeared to more than 500 of their other disciples, people at one time. They're not talking about literal brothers here, obviously. Mary didn't have that many children. But at one time, most of whom were still alive, though some have fallen asleep. In other words, they've died already. But then he appeared to James and then to all the apostles. That James they're talking about there is the brother of Jesus. That is James, his brother there. Because in the book of Acts, we continue to read that the brother of Jesus was James. He was nicknamed James the Just because he had great spiritual wisdom. He became a leader of the apostles. He was like a judge, an arbitrator, a person that could help decide all of the hard problems that the early leaders of the church were trying to figure out. He would settle disputes and provided great leadership. And the church there in Jerusalem, he was like the head pastor. He was like the head apostle of the church there. And so Jesus' own brother, who was against him for so long, became one of the head leaders of the very thing that his brother started. And that's a great testimony of what God can do and take somebody from one side of the wall to the other side. And that's a beautiful, beautiful part of the story. We read that somehow, after the resurrection, Jesus appeared specifically to James. Jesus' resurrected body went to him. And whatever took place in that interaction made a difference. Jesus reached out to his brother who had been antagonizing him, and showed him who he was, and his brother began to believe, and then probably the domino effect, and the other siblings followed within that time. So beautiful transition that took place in James' life and the brothers and sisters of Jesus. And we know that this James is the one who wrote the book of the New Testament, James. Okay, now there was a disciple of the 12 named James, but the one that wrote the book of James was the brother of Jesus. And we know that one of the other brothers of Jesus, Jude, wrote the little book Jude. That's right before the book of Revelation. So we know that two of them contributed to the Holy Scriptures that we accept today. And so his family was very, very involved in that early church, which is a great happy ending and a reminder that if we have family members, people that we love who have walked away from the Lord, or those that have chosen not to believe, that keep showing them who the real Jesus is. If we keep doing that, they could come to believe and have that kind of happy ending as well spiritually. But we're going to go back to a time when these siblings did not believe. Into our short text today, we read from the book of Mark. This is shortly after that little verse that said that they were out there telling everybody, don't listen to him, he's crazy, right? But it says, and Jesus' mother and his brothers, and it includes brothers and sisters, it's like using the word siblings, they came and they were standing outside, and they sent to him and called him. And a crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. And he answered them, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. So Jesus is in a house. He's teaching. He's healing. He's doing all these things in the house with people that are listening and following. And his mother and his brothers show up and sisters, but they can't get inside because there's so many people there. But word gets to Jesus inside. Somebody says, hey, your family's out there. They're requesting to go talk to you. Now, we don't know what they're wanting to talk to him about, but we assume that these brothers, again, these siblings, are wanting to talk to Jesus about all these things they disagree about, because that's the only thing they did talk to him about. And Mary is there too, but she's probably there. Now, I'm filling in the gaps here, but she's probably there, assuming that she's going to have to be the referee of the situation here, okay? Because she knows her kids are at it, and she's probably there trying to keep the peace and keep those kids from bothering Jesus and causing more division. Mary carried this pain. She had a divided family. That's a burden of many mothers that carry when their family has divisions and conflicts and the children not getting along and having children that don't follow God's ways, and having to carry that burden of that division in the family was very difficult for her, obviously. You know, parents that try to raise their children in the love of the Lord, to teach them how to be obedient, but eventually every grown child has to make their own decision to accept or reject that faith in Jesus that they've been taught. And some of us know that pain. We know that pain. We've raised our children to have the love of the Lord, but they've walked away. They maybe haven't grasped on to the faith of their parents and grandparents. And no matter how good we do raising them or how poorly we do in raising them, you know, it still becomes their individual decision. And in today's text, this literal fight is about to break out. An ugly scene is going to take, and she's there to try to stop it. And her maternal heart is breaking, seeing the division that's going on in her family. So keep praying for those kids, for those grandkids, the ones that have walked away, that have not embraced the faith. Stay with them. Be a good example. Keep planting seeds in their lives that will help those loved ones of ours be able to see what faith is. We don't know what it is that's going to turn them around, but we can believe in it, and we can keep walking in it and hoping for it and doing what we can. Not beating them over the head with Bibles, not bugging them and nagging them about getting to church, but by truly loving them where they're at and taking that love of Jesus and planting those seeds of faith into their lives. And our examples can help them to see what they can be. You know, this is a good spot to even say that maybe you're a parent that didn't maybe do a great job, or you look back with regrets and say, maybe I should have done this better or that better, or maybe I didn't do what I should have done for my kids and their faith. This is not a time to feel guilty about it. You know, we're all where we are in process, and God is much bigger than even our mistakes or the things we maybe didn't do right, or we could have done better, or we could have tried a different approach. And we can play what if all day long, but that doesn't change anything. But we have a God that's bigger than those what ifs. We have a God that's bigger than regrets. And God can reach out to our kids in ways that maybe we weren't able to for whatever reason. And we can believe in that. And we can be praying towards those ends. But it is the primary responsibility of family to be able to pass, to teach our children and our grandchildren, those behind us, about the faith of the Lord. When the law of God was given to Moses, he said, I want you to pass this on. And he does this. In Deuteronomy, we read this. This is just good stuff for us today, as thinking about us as parents, as grandparents, as influencers of younger generations. It says, this is the commandment, the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, Moses is saying, that you may do them in the land in which you are going over, to possess it, and that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's sons. It's saying 3 generations here. You believe it, help your children believe it, and help their children believe it. That's the job that God gave his people. Pass it on to future generations, but keep it yourself as well. And make it a lifelong commitment by keeping all of God's statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, so that your days may be long. And hear, O Israel, be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, that you may multiply greatly as the Lord your God of your fathers has promised you, in the land flowing with milk and honey. He says there's blessings that come with following God, and we teach our children, we teach our grandchildren about those blessings that come. And when we get off the track, we bring a lot of consequences, spiritual and physical and emotional, everything else. So we teach them about that lifelong commitment. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Ian, this is your favorite verse here. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. It's something that comes from the inside. It's not just that we go through the rituals, that we show up to church on Sunday at 10 o'clock, that we do all these certain prayers and read the Bible. It's more than the rituals. It's more than the holidays. It's having that heart connection with the Lord, that we love him, as Jesus said, as he repeats this and says, we're going to love with all of our heart and our soul and our strength and our mind as well, he adds. And it goes on, Moses says, it's a lifestyle. Teach it everywhere and teach it every way. He says you're going to teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in the house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. You know, whoever the younger ones are, it doesn't even mean you have to be young children, but in our life, are we talking about the Lord? Are we teaching about the Lord? Are we bringing it up, not in a lecture sort of way, teaching, but just talking about what God's doing in our lives, sharing it with those that are following us, that we can influence them as they see God working in our lives, the good, the bad, the ugly, to be able to share it on so that they can learn as well, and to do it in every way, so that when they see us, when they look between our eyes, they see, that's a person of faith. They truly believe and they follow the things that they're teaching us. So just a little side note here, as mothers, as fathers, as grandmas, as grandpas, as aunts, uncles, whoever we have influence under us, let's be committed to that, to passing that on to the next generations. But going back to our story here, Jesus, answered. He said, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And it sounds like it's saying something really rude. He's kind of discounting them a little bit there. But that's not what he's doing. He's trying to teach them something about the kingdom of God. He's trying to teach it about. He says that there's a family that even holds greater weight than our own blood relatives. He says those that are seeking God's will, that are seeking his kingdom, for those that are following him, we become to him like a mother and a brother and a sister. He sees us as his family. In John 1, Jesus says that faith gives us the right to become children of God. In Romans 8, Paul writes about how faith is a path to adoption into the family of God. And Jesus shed his blood, and the DNA of his blood comes in and mixes with our human blood. That divine DNA that says we belong to the family of God. And that's what he does for us. He says, those that do the will of God, you're my brothers and my sisters. You're my family now. And he puts us into a bigger family. It's great to have our family tree, but there's more to that. Our family tree now includes people of faith in our own community, in our own church, around the world, that we are part of one community of faith, of one family of God. And he brings us into that as well. And we have lots of moms and dads in that family of God. We have lots of grandmas and grandpas in that family of God. We've got a lot of kids in that family of God, and grandkids in that family of God, and cousins and brothers and sisters, and the family of God, as we meet together and as we grow together and worship and as we serve together. What a great honor to be a part of something even bigger than just our blood family. And we bring that into that. And that's what he does for us. Jesus sees us that. So happy Mother's Day. Let's keep following Jesus, whatever our roles are as mother, towards our mothers, for those around us. And let us be a place of refuge and protection and teaching for those around us.